Welcome to Inside Politics with Kevin Klein, beyond the headlines, beyond the spin. Straight facts, sharp analysis, and common sense conversation you won't hear anywhere else. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm Kevin Klein. Welcome to another edition of Inside Politics. I am joined by two of my Winnipeg Sun colleagues. Jeff Currier, who normally joins us, is taking an extended long weekend. But we have Lawrence Pinsky, an attorney and a former human rights adjudicator, a member of King's Council, and Winnipeg Sun columnist, as I said. Also, Royce Coop, a Winnipeg Sun columnist and a professor of political sciences at the University of Manitoba. Well, it has certainly been an interesting week for Canada, and I have always said you can't manage something if you don't measure it. And some measurements came out that showed us since March, Mark Carney has taken 9 foreign trips, none of which have resulted in any formal deals for trade. Not one. And then we get the news today that our GDP has plummeted. And that's really bad for the economy. And on top of that, we also hear that Crown Royal, the famous Canadian whiskey made in Manitoba, as bottling in Ontario, is shutting down its Ontario plant to do its bottling in the United States. So here we have premiers and especially Wab Kinew talking about how we're just getting rid of U.S. alcohol and Canadian alcohol manufacturers are going down south. Gentlemen, is this the start of something really bad?
It's not the start, it's the continuation. This was completely predictable from Mr. Carney's policies that just absolutely reflect Mr. Trudeau's policies. You know, it's amazing to me. They had a really good patient, the Canadian economy, when Mr. Harper left it as such. And through the really detrimental medicine that Mr. Trudeau applied to our economy, now made even worse by Mr. Carney, the patient keeps getting sicker. And every time the Canadian economy gets sicker, they give more medicine, which is more offensive and economic policies that really restrict the economy. So they give something else, and that makes the patient even sicker, and on it goes. And we see this reflected both in the stats you just mentioned, Kevin, and we see it also in what has been called the carbon tax 2.0. We see policy after policy failure. Canadians should be very, very, very concerned about what they see going on.
Do you think we are? Do you think Canadians are concerned, Royce?
Yes, and they will get more concerned. The GDP numbers are frightening. And I think when we talk about these issues, we talk about numbers, we talk about rates going up and down. Where this is going to show itself is in the lives of Canadians. It's going to make life harder. It's going to make life difficult. We know that cost of living is already far and away the most important thing that Canadians are worried about, and things are about to get much worse. The Crown Royal thing is a powerful symbol. I think that people are going to read that and kind of be taken aback. They're going to see it as an example of the economic problems we're having in this country right now, and as Lawrence said, Mark Carney has to wear this. He's dealing with the Trudeau legacy, but he's also making decisions that are not making things better. They're making things worse.
Well, he's not managing the country. He's managing his own reputation, or not really reputation, popularity on the international stage. I mean, the fact that he made 9 trips since March, think about that. Those are 9 foreign trips that are not, cheap, paid for by Canadian taxpayers, that really resulted in nothing, absolutely nothing. They have nothing to show for that. So what happened to this great negotiator and business person, Lawrence?
I don't want to be redundant, but what we see Mr. Carney doing, that elbows up piece, it was indeed, as I wrote before in the Sun, the first step in the chicken dance across the international stage. He goes to Germany. He gets overshadowed really by the Chancellor of Germany in terms of the economy, in terms of his position on Palestine, in terms of absolutely every one of his policies. Perhaps he'll buy a submarine or two in Germany, but it's absolutely ridiculous. The people he's associating with and aligning with, the economic policies he's following, they're an embarrassment, frankly. They are, as Mr. Hitchens once said, they're cleaved together. His policies and Mr. Trudeau's, like two sides, like two buttocks on the derriere that he's turned Canada into, and it's really unfortunate. Um,
So it
that's the
really
reality,
is. It really is Trudeau 2.0.
right? And
Yeah.
it's not a surprise. He has the same people around him. It's exactly the same people. And when you I said this during the election, when you read his book,
Yes.
you see how faulty and disingenuous his policies are, and it's not a surprise what's happened with our GDP. It's not a surprise what's happened with Crown Royal. We're just going to see more of the same.
Yeah, and it's been interesting seeing the media kind of grapple with the fruits of some of these efforts, these international trips. The government has been they've been trying very hard to spin some of the outcomes. An MOU, even people in the media, which is for months now being quite deferential to the prime minister, to say like, well, actually, an MOU, this stuff doesn't mean anything. The outcome of this work is pretty much nil at this point. And so that's been an interesting thing to see, I think.
If I recall correctly, Mr. Carney re-announced the same policy again that was announced once before. No action taken, just an announcement. So it's that old idea: announce twice, do nothing. And it's a repeat. It's what I said before. It's a repeat of failed policies.
It is the same, I think, at all levels of government right now, just to make announcements and do nothing. Pierre Poilievre, elected back into the House of Commons, already making his self known on the social media pages and making a point about Carney's policy. Apparently, Carney has put forward a policy for the carbon tax 2.0. We'll play this clip of Pierre Poilievre explaining exactly what we're in for.
Mark Carney, the father of the carbon tax, who, of course, was the one who advised Trudeau to bring it in, was forced on the eve of the election to reverse himself and promise to do as I said and axe the carbon tax. But I warned Canadians then he would bring it back when he no longer needed your vote, but still needed your money. And sure enough, here we are today. Mark Carney is bringing back the carbon tax 2.0. He calls it the Clean Fuel Standard, Clean Fuel Regulations. According to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, it will add 17 cents a liter to your gas. What did the last carbon tax add to your gas? 17 cents a liter. The new tax is starting to look a lot like the old tax. And Mark Carney thinks no one will notice. Well, concerned.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the most important concern of Canadians right now is cost of living, and a lot of Canadians connect that to high taxes, high government spending, out of control government in this country. And so, Pierre Poilievre, uh, if he can continue to harp away on these issues, if he can identify new ways that the government is increasing cost of living, that's going to help him. I think some people thought like, well, this is a little bit redundant. He's kind of playing the classics. He's going back to what's worked in the past. I'm not so convinced. This is a major issue of concern to Canadians, and the more that he can harp away at it, the better off he's going to be, I think.
And Carney never said he was getting rid of the carbon tax entirely. He said he was pausing it, right? He never said he was getting rid of it. He never put in legislation to get rid of it. He just said he was pausing it, and he paused it for the election. And I think he did that as a political move, right? Take that power away from the Conservative Party because that's what the Conservative Party talked all about. Am I wrong, Lawrence?
No, you're entirely right. And Royce said it best. The effect, it's not just about policy, it's the effect is on people, costs that will go up for people. And who's hit hardest? The working poor and poor people. That's where hit
Yeah.
the hardest by these failed policies over and over again. Now, this isn't, again, it's not new what Mr. Carney's done, but the entire, even the concept of the industrial carbon tax is wrong because it's a hidden tax that still boosts all prices. And now this on top, adding 17 cents a liter for gas. Once again, who's affected? The working poor and the poor, much more than the wealthy. And it's really, I don't want to say it over. I don't want to say it over and over again. I want Canada to be successful, but you've got to point out these failed policies, and hopefully Canadians at some point will give their heads a shake and say, I know he's got a really nice CV, But my God, you have to have facts on the ground. You have to have working projects on the ground. And that's where he's failing.
Well, and I
Well,
think,
so
a lot of people, sorry, Bryce, I just think a lot of people are missing the fact that there's a huge ripple effect when you increase gas. Like, it's not just 17 cents on gas. That will, in essence, raise prices on almost everything because everything has to be transported from point A to point B.
yeah, it's the tax on everything. And when Carney got rid of the carbon tax, Pierre Poilievre and conservative MPs basically made this point, like we could see this come back in a different form. He was leaving the door open, and people dismissed him. He said, "Oh, that he's just being conspiratorial." Now we're actually seeing something like that happen. Lawrence was saying that I wonder when Canadians are going to get past the credentials when it comes to Mark Carney. We're already seeing that. There was an Abacus poll published this week that shows that for the first time since the election, conservatives are actually more popular than the liberals. Mark Carney's honeymoon lasted for a total of like 4 months. And as economic conditions get worse, we expect those numbers are going to continue to go down.
Yeah, it's what I said before. I mean, I don't think Royce wants this. I don't think you want it, Kevin, and I don't want it either. We want Canada to succeed. We want Canadians to succeed. But I hope you're right, Royce. I hope that Canadians are beginning to understand that these are policies and problems made in Canada that are causing these problems. It doesn't have to be this way. And that's the issue. So I hope Canadians will wake up and are waking up. That's what's critical because it affects us on so many fronts. So I really hope that we do wake up to that. Certainly, we're trying.
Well, I think my biggest fear with all this is that as Canadians hopefully do wake up, Carney has a good amount of time. He has almost a majority government. The NDP are in no position to call an election. I know Royce and others have talked before that the NDP don't want to do what they did last time and get caught propping up the party. But look, they don't have a good leader. They don't have a leader period right now. They don't have money for an election. They're not going to call an election anytime soon, and they're certainly not going to take the government down. So my fear is how much damage can be done. The 17 cents a liter is going to cause a lot of damage. I was shocked when I was at the store the other day and we were looking at having steaks. It was a nice summer night. We wanted to have some steaks. And I thought, I'm going to have to go to the bank first and get a loan. Three steaks were $98. And God, I was shocked. I thought, well, how can people afford to eat this? And now that is going to go up even more under Carney. And I think my fear really is, will Canadians learn? Because I think this government's going to do exactly what the Trudeau government did and make people more reliant on the government for checks and for, help or whatever. But business is leaving the country, and we have to stop that. And I
Kevin, it
don't think
sounds like
Carney's the guy.
Kevin, it sounds like you read Mr. Carney's book because that's essentially what he's talking about. Is again a government controlling. You want choice of car? I don't think so. You
Yeah.
might not even have a car. You want choice in your economic future for yourself and your children? I don't think so. He knows better. That's what his book is about. The
Mhm.
control by an elite over the people of Canada, a very rarefied elite. I mean, I'm sitting here as a lawyer and I'm saying this is atrocious. His book was atrocious and frightening as can be. And that's what he actually is putting into place. And you mentioned the NDP. When you look at the people who are running for leadership in the NDP who prop up his government, it's actually even worse.
Yeah.
Uh, their positions are way out of the mainstream, way left of center, and it is very, very concerning. The upside, of course, is that maybe that with Pierre Poilievre back in Parliament, maybe that will get things going in the right direction. And when you think, frankly, of course, we have the CBC covering Parliament, that still many Canadians get their news from the CBC, bought and paid for. What is it, 1.5 or $2 billion that they get
Yeah, I
annually?
wouldn't say it's news, propaganda, maybe.
Exactly. That's exactly the point. And a lot of people are getting their information from there still. which is an enormous problem. The bias that goes on at the CBC is unforgivable.
Well, and I did write a column about Carney's book as the election was going on, and I remember Royce saying he hadn't read it yet. But then I saw on Twitter that you did read it, Royce.
I did. I think I kind of gave it the skim read, the classic academic skim read. My view is it's just simply the liberal politicians are chameleons, and so the book is kind of an artifact of history. It's what he believed, but he'll be sure to replace his beliefs as long as it's politically expedient to do so. It's really concerning. For a very long time, the liberals were unpopular. Suddenly, they were popular as soon as Mark Carney became the leader. They instantly called an election, ran a campaign that was vague on promises. As you might recall, Mark Carney took several holidays during the election campaign. Well, not holidays. He had to get back to Ottawa to deal with crises and stay away from the media. Got elected, and now the government is dropping in popularity again. But as you say, Kevin, we're stuck with them for 4 years, and the concerns of what's going to happen over the next 4 years. The question is, even in the last election, the Liberals weren't popular. The issue there was COVID. In this most recent election, the issue was Trump. So, at what point are the Liberals going to be held accountable for their economic management of this country? It's some short-term issue that comes along that captivates Canadians, that allows them to get reelected despite their mismanagement of the economy. It's frustrating. I'm really concerned about the next 3 years, to be honest.
Shortest memories in the world, Canadian voters. That's what I have always kind of thought, right? They have the shortest memories in the world. We just keep re-electing the same people, and we have the same problem. So now we're having an economic problem. We know the GDP is going to cause an will have a big economic impact. Remember, that's why Greece went bankrupt, is because their GDP dropped so far that they just couldn't afford to pay anything anymore and had to claim bankruptcy in a sense. But we're also having a crisis of Canadian culture and hate on the streets of Canada. There was a post on X that grabbed my attention, and it was from a guy who is the founder of Paramount Foods, a huge food company, restaurants and stuff in Ontario, and he was a recipient of the Order of Canada. And he put out a tweet, and this is what the tweet reads, or post on X, or whatever you want to call it now. On behalf of literally every Canadian of conscience, if you are a Canadian and a supporter of Israel, you do not have basic human values, let alone Canadian values. Your tweets and messages are saved and known to all of us. They live. Some might not comment around you because they are polite or respectful of whatever role you have in society, or just don't want to roll in the mud with you. But you know this, your lack of Canadian and human values will not be forgotten. Lawrence, you're an attorney. Is this guy not making a threat on Canadians?
It certainly sounds like it, and he's one of many. And I want to tell you some other background that went on this week. In Ottawa, a woman was stabbed in a grocery store. It looks like it was because she was Jewish. In Belgium, a doctor seeing a patient wrote under the allergy section that her allergy was to Jews because she's Jewish. Anti-Semitic things. Here in Winnipeg, we hear of Israelis and Jewish people being afraid to go see a doctor because of what might happen to them and what people are posting, like this gentleman. There's a terrific amount of anti-Semitism here. And when Mr. Carney says, for example, that Muslim values are Canadian values, and here this is not an affront on Islam generally at all. That's not where I live. But when you hear him say that, and you hear and you see what happened at Folklorama, at the Israel Pavilion, and you see what happened on April 1st outside the Jewish Community Center, you have to say to yourself, what in God's name is Canada coming to? In Manitoba, we had our premier announce that there was going to be a Crown Council appointed months ago to deal with anti-Semitism. My information is that no one's been appointed. Nobody.
Does that shock you?
No, it's what one would expect. many in the Jewish community, the legacy leadership, applauded him. Where have they pressed on to say, where is this appointee? We have an anti-Semitism curriculum at schools now, and a person was appointed to do that. And our premier, instead of creating a unified committee dealing with hate in Manitoba, with people fighting anti-Semitism, Indigenous people, Métis people, Christian people, 200 churches burned in the last couple of years? Yep. Hindus, Sikhs, instead of putting a unified committee together, he created a separate committee for Islamophobia, which is nowhere near. I'm not obviously in favor of people doing anything against anyone based on faith or anything else, but he put together a committee, our premier, dealing with Islamophobia, allegedly, with 12 people on it. One committee goes against what the other committee said, nothing unifying. Our political leadership is failing on this issue over and over and over again. And it's frightening. As for this individual, frankly, the Order of Canada should be taken away. It's been taken away for people for a lot less than that. This guy issuing a threat to two Canadians. Yeah. And, he's lifted the veil, though, because they are keeping track. That's exactly what they're doing.
Well, and if I was in politics, if I was back in politics, it would be my mission to ensure that this person had the Order of Canada revoked, taken back. I mean, you don't make threats towards anybody, and you certainly don't make threats towards all Canadians. And to say that if you support Israel, that you're not supportive of Canadian values. Well, that is the Canadian values. We've lost the Canadian values, and I agree. The decision politicians have been making, especially for the last 10 years, are the most divisive decisions I have seen in history. And I love looking at old political, history books and reading the stories. But we right now, and as I said, for the last 10 years, are dividing this country. We are attacking ourselves from within. And I think, personally, it is on Mark Carney to immediately take action on this and say, okay, revoke his Order of Canada and do something about it. I mean, we see it in schools, Royce.
Yeah, I think, as I've said before, it's important that Canadians feel that they can comment on these things. You can criticize the Israeli government, you can criticize Hamas. We should be able to take different positions on these kinds of debates. What's concerning is the kind of rhetorical inflation. And people in leadership roles, in politicians, but also, cultural leaders in the media, really are quite reluctant to criticize people that say things like this character that you've quoted, and there's real cost to that. Lawrence pointed out, this leads to people feeling emboldened to do things that they wouldn't otherwise do. So we should very quickly and forcefully condemn these kinds of comments because we rightfully do not like the kinds of things that it leads to. Uh, yeah, yeah.
But have political leaders not created a Canada that is lawless? Because if you're making a threat towards all Canadians, and one could read that, and I'm not an attorney like Lawrence is, but I would read that as a threat. I saw other people online that, considered it a threat, and it is very much a threat. Where is the law? Like why, yes, politicians seem to be very afraid. And what are you afraid of? You're supposed to uphold the laws of the land, because if you don't, we have chaos. And isn't that what's happening now? There's chaos in our economy. There's chaos now in Canada from protest and flag burning and all.
I think, sorry, I was just going to say, we saw this at Folklorama. We saw it on April 1st, where the police are being told by their superiors, who are being told by politicians, don't enforce the criminal code. And they say don't enforce it at the time because we want to de-escalate, but in fact they don't enforce it afterwards either. And that in fact grants license to escalating breaches of the criminal code, which frankly is the opposite of Canadian values. And it's a real concern. I cannot imagine anyone saying what this gentleman wrote and said about any other group at all. about Indigenous people or Métis people or African Canadians or anything else and getting away with it.
Nope.
And that's what we see. Somehow it's okay to have a field day against the Jewish community. And whatever else Mr. Trump's issues might be and how he speaks, and whatever else his issues might be in terms of certain aspects of democracy in the United States, his administration has actually taken action against it. And I think they're going to be concerned about what's going on in Canada. In fact, I know they are. And that's another aspect of the problem. And when we have, now to tie it back, decreasing GDP, economic interest leaving Canada, you know who's perfectly suited to take advantage of that to Canadians' a detriment? Mr. Trump. He has a history of business of dealing with bankrupt economies, bankrupt businesses, and coming out ahead. And it should be a real concern for all of us.
Yeah, Lawrence is right. Small crimes turn into big crimes. You have to address small crimes, or they will metastasize. And this is true with respect to these protests that we were talking about last week outside of Jewish hospitals, schools, seniors' homes. But it's also true with respect to other groups. You know, when their churches in Canada were being burned, the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, said it was understandable. Oh, it's understandable. People are frustrated. We've seen, in some cases, Khalistani separatists in Canada get into conflicts outside of Hindu facilities in Canada. This is really concerning stuff happening in this country, and we need to address it now, or it gets worse in the future. And so it's not just these Palestinian protests. You can see it bleeding into other areas too.
Well, it again, it comes back to politicians, I think, is why are they so fearful to deal with it? Why, a lot of people have sent me emails and some comments on some of the articles when I write about what politicians have the right to do or they shouldn't, they're not doing and such, is why is there not a recall ability in Canada? You can't recall an election, right, Royce? I mean, you're the professor of political science. People can't just sign a petition and get people taken out of office. So there really is no accountability, and politicians count on the fact that we have that short memory that we talked about earlier. How can you get them out of office?
Well, in some provinces they do have recall legislation. Not in Manitoba. In BC they do. It's rarely used because, well, in Alberta, the threshold is quite high, and so if you want to get rid of a politician, you have to go collect signatures, and usually the politician sees the writing on the wall, they resign before they can get kicked out of office. And so in Canada, it'd be very easy. It's a simple piece of legislation that gives people the opportunity to recall their representatives. There's lots of reasons to oppose recall, but over time I've gotten more supportive of it. I think if you get the right balance, you make it hard enough that you actually have to put some real effort into it. There needs to be grassroots mobilization. It could be a really good thing in terms of holding politicians accountable. Because yeah, it's a fair point. You elect an MP, they go to Ottawa, you don't see them for 4 years, and then they're back looking for your vote. There should be ways to address that between elections, I think.
I hear I'm going to voice a different opinion, but Royce, my view is your old view, which is that the time we have to do that is at elections. That's when we have to do it. Having recall issues is problematic from a number of respects that I don't know if you want me to get into, but it's problematic. Politicians should do the right thing, and at elections, Canadians have to be smart enough to pass the IQ test and vote out the scoundrels, the people with the bad policies, and vote in the people who, whether they present as a little aggressive or litigious or not, they have to be voted in if you like the policy. That's
Warren
the time
Buffett,
to do it.
Warren Buffett has always said, if you want to fix America, or you want to fix politics, have a rule that if you break your promises or you can't balance the budget, you're not allowed to run in an election again. There has to be, not that I don't well, I do disagree with you, Lawrence. I agree more with Royce that there has to be some type of mechanism that puts the fear into politicians, because right now there is no fear. Most of the Liberal MPs probably believe they're in there for 4 years at least, that they're going to be there for 4 years, and it's the same everywhere else. And we're seeing them really ignore the issues that are going on, but more importantly, they seem to be, giving them credence or credibility by allowing it to go on. I want to bring up one thing. We didn't talk about this beforehand, but the Winnipeg police go to all these steps to get a search warrant to go onto public property and check an encampment, and it was a wooden structure. So they said, well, because it was a wooden structure, it's probably a house. Well, excuse me, hang on a second. If they're not paying property taxes, if it hasn't, it hasn't paid for permits, if it's not on bought land, how is it a house?
I'll leave this one to Lawrence. The lawyer in the room can address this.
To address what a house is, it's all. It does stop at it starts and stops at the political level, and that's where the change has to come to place. I'm a Westminster guy. I don't think there should be recalls, which is a U.S. sort of trend that came up to Alberta and BC. Just to go back to that, the time to do it is at elections. And
you're not answering the question, Lawrence. You're not answering the question. Are we not giving has the Winnipeg Police and the government now given precedent to people who build wooden structures along a riverbank on public property that is now their land? That is their home, and they have all the rights of any homeowner.
It's a ridiculous concept, and that isn't the law. So, how's that for answering your question? That is not the law. It's a ridiculous position. It's one of many, but I'm going to argue that it's not really a police position. It comes from behind the police.
Yes.
It comes from the political echelon, and that's where we have to focus. It's not the cop on the ground. It really isn't. It's a hierarchical entity, and ultimately it's a matter really for the mayor in a general sense and the Minister of Justice in a particular sense. The mayor can't say to the police, go do this specific task against this particular group, but he can give direction. The Attorney General can do that. Kelvin Gertson just wrote a piece talking about exactly that. And he's right. Kelvin is entirely right. I would love to see every former Attorney General come forward, maybe in the Sun, maybe elsewhere, and say, this is what you can do, and this is nonsense, what's happening,
right,
as they should.
The mayor has the ability to talk to the police board, and the police board, I was the chair of the police board, has the ability to talk to the chief and matters of concern. And to me, this is a concern. They held a press conference. They brought in social workers and other people to help the folks, because police were coming there. And we execute search warrants, or the police execute search warrants all the time. They go into apartment buildings. Nobody brings in support workers or social services to help everybody else in the apartment building feel better. In Calgary, they were executing a search warrant. Gunfire started. They didn't have people talking to the neighbors. They didn't go door to door and offer them help. But here, we took the step that I think is going to set a really bad precedent. I might be wrong. I'm not an attorney, but we took the step to say, well, if we're going to go into that encampment, into somebody's enclosure, we have to get a search warrant.
It's a good argument. I think another aspect of this is that it's drawing attention to crime in these encampments. We had an encampment that was close to our house, and the major concern with it was crime. You don't want to say everyone that lives in these encampments is a criminal. Some of them are in very sad circumstances, but crime is a factor with these encampments. And if you live in a neighborhood where there's an encampment, or you know people have been moved in there and they're setting up shop, it is a consideration. And so, yeah, the question of whether or not it's a home is concerning to me, but I also like the fact that the police are actually starting to engage with crime that's related to some of these encampments.
And I should say this, there's two issues that are overlapping here. One is the issue of the warrant, which is correct. You would need a warrant. If they were on a tent somewhere, if somebody was in a tent, you'd still need a warrant. That's
Even
a different
on public property?
You'd need a warrant unless you have reasonable and probable grounds to suspect a crime is going on. But and I don't know the particulars of this case, but if they're following up on a crime, it's different than if they're just going to search for some other reason, that there's some larger issue. So I'm not sure of the particulars about that. But in general, the notion that the police need a warrant to search is the right one in a free and democratic society. Different than the issue is if someone squats tomorrow and builds a wooden structure at the legislature. Does that mean that's their home and they have property rights? The answer is no.
Yeah, but does someone not have the right to argue now that the government and the police basically said they do?
Well, people can argue anything, and that's why the gods created judges to tell them, no, that's not the law. I presume it was the
I
gods.
thought they I thought they got created to collect a whole big paycheck and let people free all the time. Oh,
I was
sorry,
worried, Kevin, that you were
just
going to
being
say,
cynical.
I thought you were going to say, Kevin, I was worried it wasn't God, it was the other guy. But no, it was the gods. It was the gods.
I want to wrap up here real quickly, guys. It's been a good conversation, but on the recent by-election in Manitoba, we saw a seat in Manitoba called Spruce Woods that I think since the beginning of time has been a conservative seat, and they've always won by 50% or 60%, and it's just a blowaway seat for the progressive conservatives in Manitoba. This time, it was this close. I think it was 40 or 70 votes difference between the NDP candidate and the PC candidate. I think that that sends a warning bell for the progressive conservatives here in Manitoba. What do you think, Royce?
Yeah, it's not a good outcome. I mean, the on the other hand, I mean, I think my view is a little contrary to most of the people that are writing, doing analysis on this. The NDP really pulled out all the stops in this by-election, more than any by-election I've ever seen. In terms of the timing of the election, the government spending that took place in the lead up to the by-election, the amount of time that the premier himself and NDP politicians were out there. And so I don't know. I see this by-elections are funny events. I don't need to tell both of you this. You both know about by-elections. You ran in by-elections.
Mhm.
They're funny events. I don't want to attach too much significance to this. I tend to see this is kind of a product of the NDP really putting in a lot of effort. You know, it just kind of shows that if you really work at it, you can improve your vote share even in places where you wouldn't normally do well. Beyond that, we know the PCs are in a valley right now. We know that they're not polling well. This reflects that, and I'm not sure I would say much more than that.
I'm going to say more than that because of my dark past, my dark political past in Tuxedo. Um, the flip side, Royce, of what you're saying is the lack of coordination in the PC party. The facts on the ground are that they were not coordinated. The same thing we saw in Tuxedo. NDP ministers and others were at the doors for weeks before the PCs decided to call their nomination in Tuxedo, never mind anything else, putting the candidate, who happened to be me, at a disadvantage. Another disadvantage in Tuxedo was knocking on doors and hearing about how many people were disgusted by the last provincial general election campaign and the previous premier's policies. And in this, although the buck does stop with her, the reality is it was some of the people around her who may be some of the same people around the current leader. I don't know. But there are fundamental problems going on, facts on the ground in the PC party in this by-election we just saw in Tuxedo. And if they don't get their act together, there's not going to be much of a future. Kevin wrote an article about the not much of a future concept.
Mhm.
And he has some very good, strong points around that. I'd prefer to see a reinvigorated PC party in Manitoba. I think we need that. But I'm telling you, their act was not together in terms of the ground campaign, the ground battle in Spruce Woods, and frankly in Tuxedo. And while the NDP had it all together, and they need to take some real sober thoughts about what happened.
Well, no, I agree 100%. I think it's a message to the party. And I think that if you look at the comments that are on social media, you look at the comments that were on the Winnipeg Sun website, a lot of people are saying that same thing is, look, they don't have any faith in the party right now. They think the party has gone too liberal. They think the party's gone too far in one direction, that it needs to stand up for something. It needs to start taking a stance on how they feel politically. They need to start being a real opposition and challenging with ideas and challenging important things like the fact that we've promised to get rid of, or house all the homeless encampment people, and that hasn't happened. Or we've promised to fix healthcare. there. That hasn't happened. They need to tackle those things as opposed to what stock somebody bought. And that seems to be where they spend their time. Well, this guy bought stocks here, or bought stocks there, or Wamkanu did this on social media and it was illegal. They're also hit by their own problems, right? You had the leader that made the media, I think, the day of the election with the fact that his store was evicted from a mall in the city, or there was an eviction notice on a store that he is a part of. It's not helping the party, and I think people are speaking about that. And I did write that. There's always been talk of another party in this province, and I think that the party itself has to I think you're right. Has to come up from the flames, but I don't know if they can. I look at BC, I look at Alberta, where new parties came out and took the reins over, and I see that as potential in Manitoba.
Saskatchewan too, and
Right.
for me, it's the ground game. There's no effective ground game, quite apart from all the political issues that you talk about, and maybe that's why there's no effective ground game. But that's a real issue. I'm hoping that the PC party can reinvigorate itself and come back to life. I hope this leader has success with it. I really do.
I
But
agree.
if not, yeah, there's going to have to be alternatives because Manitobans deserve an effective alternative. I'm just hoping it can be within the PC party. If it can't be, we still need an alternative.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any insider knowledge about the organization of the party, so I defer to both of you. I mean, the party does need some organizational renewal. I think everyone knows that. It's normal after any party loses an election. I think one thing I'd like to see is a kind of policy revival too. The party take the opportunity of being in the opposition to think clearly about what do we actually believe, and have conversations, have some kind of convention where actually kind of hash these things out. What does it mean to be a kind of center right alternative in a place like Manitoba these days? And once you kind of sort that out, a lot of people are not going to respond to ambiguity on these questions. The conservative parties cannot get away with being the Liberal Party. They have to believe something. They have to present clear alternatives to voters. And the PC party can do that. They can work these things out. It's going to help them, I think.
I
I,
agree with you, Royce.
I agree,
Yeah.
100%. Good conversation, gentlemen. Thank you very much. For everybody watching, thank you for taking the time to watch Inside Politics. Please like this video, share it, and follow our YouTube page. Have a fantastic long weekend, both of you.
Thanks for watching Inside Politics with Kevin Klein. Please like and subscribe to this channel and visit thewinnipegssun.com for more.